"If you have that child, I'll shatter your family," the millionaire CEO warned. But 4 years later, he saw her walking with a beautiful daughter. Ray had walked through dozens of cities in his life, but this park felt different, smaller, quieter, almost invisible. He had come only to clear his head before his next meeting, nothing more. Then he saw her, a woman sitting on a bench near the fountain, laughing softly at something a child had said. At first it meant nothing, just another face, another stranger, until the laugh reached him, and his steps slowed without his permission. It wasn't the way she looked, it was the way she tilted her head when she laughed, slightly to the left, like she always used to when she was trying not to be too loud in public. Ray stopped walking. The world around him kept moving. Joggers passed, a dog barked in the distance, leaves shifted in the light breeze, but his body refused to follow, because he knew that gesture, and there was only one person in the world who did it like that. Tanya Howell. His eyes moved from her face to the small hand wrapped around hers. The girl couldn't have been more than 4. Dark hair pulled into 2 uneven ponytails, shoes with flashing lights, a half-eaten cookie in her free hand. She looked up at Tanya with the kind of trust that didn't need words. Ray felt his chest tighten. The shape of the girl's face, the curve of her smile. It wasn't familiarity, it was recognition. Ray's mind tried to reject what his eyes were telling him. There had to be another explanation, another story that made more sense, another reason his heart had suddenly started beating like it was late for something important. But no matter how hard he searched for logic, the truth kept standing in front of him. 4 years. That's how long it had been since he last saw Tanya walk out of his office. 4 years since he told her words he had never said out loud to anyone before. 4 years since he convinced himself he had moved on. And now there she was, not alone, with a child who carried pieces of his face in hers. His throat went dry. For the first time in years, Ray Smitham, the man who controlled companies, deals, and futures, felt completely unprepared for the next second of his own life. Before Ray could find his voice, before Tanya could turn around, before the child could ask another innocent question, time seemed to pause, not the kind of pause that feels dramatic, the kind that feels quiet and heavy, like the air itself is waiting. And it's in moments like that, the ones where a single second can reshape an entire life, that the real stories begin. Welcome to Mr. Cooper Stories, where we share human stories about love, loss, and the choices that stay with us longer than we expect. If stories about real people, real mistakes, and second chances speak to you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, not for drama, not for noise, just for honest stories that remind us we're not alone in the things we carry. Have you ever walked into a moment you thought you had left behind, only to realize it never actually left you? Not in memory, not in feeling, not in the quiet corners of your mind where unfinished choices still wait. Some mistakes don't fade. They don't disappear with time or success or distance. They simply wait, waiting for the one moment when you finally have to look at them again. Ray became aware of his breathing again. Too shallow, too fast. The little girl tugged gently at Tanya's hand, trying to get her attention. Tanya leaned down, listening, smiling, completely unaware that the past was standing only a few steps behind her. Ray noticed small details he shouldn't have cared about. The way Tanya's hair caught the light, the way the child leaned into her leg for comfort. But for him, everything had already shifted. Tanya began to turn. Not fully, just slightly, as if she felt something behind her but didn't know what it was yet. This was it. The second he had imagined and avoided for 4 years. He wondered, in a sudden and useless way, what he should say first. Her name? An apology? Nothing at all. The child looked in his direction before Tanya did. Their eyes met, and the girl smiled. It wasn't a polite smile. It wasn't cautious or curious or unsure. It was open, the kind of smile that assumed the world was kind, because no one had ever taught her otherwise. Ray felt something inside him give way. He had seen hundreds of people smile at him before. Employees, partners, strangers who recognized his face, but none of those smiles had ever carried weight. This one did. Because this smile didn't know who he was. It didn't know what he had done. It just existed. The girl's lips moved again. "Mommy?" Her voice was soft, almost shy, as if she wasn't sure whether she was allowed to interrupt the moment. Tanya followed the sound of her voice and finally turned. At first her eyes passed over Ray without recognition, just another man standing in the park. Then they returned to him, and stopped. Her smile faded, not in shock, not in fear, but in a slow, careful stillness, like someone realizing a door they had closed years ago was suddenly standing open again. "Ray," she said quietly. No one spoke. Not Ray, not Tanya, not even the little girl, who now sensed that something important had entered the space between them. The sounds of the park returned slowly. Distant laughter, footsteps on gravel, water moving in the fountain. But they felt far away, like they belonged to another world. Ray realized he had rehearsed many conversations in his mind over the years, None of them had prepared him for this silence. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't warm. It was simply heavy with everything they had never said. Ray finally managed to speak. It wasn't the sentence he had imagined during all those years of quiet regret. It was just her name. Tanya. Saying it felt strange, like using a word from a language he had forgotten how to speak. She only looked at him, as if she were checking whether he was real, or just another memory trying to return without permission. The child squeezed her hand again, sensing the tension without understanding it. Tanya looked down at her daughter, not at Ray. Her eyes softened in a way that told Ray everything he needed to know about where her priorities now lived. "Someone I used to know," she said. Her voice was calm, not cold, not warm, just honest. Annika studied Ray again, tilting her head slightly, the same way Tanya had done earlier. Ray felt the weight of those words settle over him. Someone I used to know, not someone important, not someone special, not even someone to explain, just someone from a past that no longer had power over the present. And somehow, that hurt more than any anger ever could. Annika didn't seem interested in the history behind the moment. She looked up at Ray again, still holding her mother's hand, and studied his face with quiet attention. "You look sad," she said simply. No judgment, no curiosity, just an observation spoken with the honesty only children carry. Ray felt the words land deeper than any accusation ever could. He knelt down slightly so he was closer to her level, unsure why he was doing it, only knowing that standing felt impossible. He said, his voice softer than he expected it to be. Annika smiled again, and in that small exchange, something inside him finally broke open. Ray stayed there, half kneeling, unsure whether to stand or speak or step back. Tanya watched him carefully, not with anger, not with hope, just awareness. This was the moment where he could say too much, or the wrong thing entirely. The moment where one sentence could open a door, or close it forever. Ray opened his mouth again, and this time, before a single word could escape, the world held its breath. Ray Smitham had built his entire life on one simple rule: nothing should ever slow him down. His mornings started before the sun, emails before breakfast, calls before coffee, meetings stacked so tightly that silence had become something he only experienced in elevators. At 32, he wasn't just successful, he was admired. Quoted in magazines, invited to panels, introduced in rooms with titles that made people sit straighter. CEO, founder, visionary. But underneath all of it, Ray didn't see himself as special. He saw himself as necessary. Necessary to decisions, necessary to outcomes, necessary to keeping everything moving exactly the way he planned. Waiting felt like weakness, and he had trained himself never to feel weak. Ray's calendar looked less like a plan and more like a warning. Blue blocks filled every hour, calls with investors, strategy meetings, product reviews, lunches he barely tasted, dinners he often skipped. Even his free time was scheduled. Gym at 6, dinner at 9, sleep when his body forced it. People admired his discipline. They said he was focused, driven, efficient, safe. As long as every minute was accounted for, nothing unexpected could enter his life. No surprises, no delays, no moments that asked questions he didn't already know how to answer. Control wasn't just how he worked, it was how he stayed comfortable inside his own head. Ray's engagement had made perfect sense on paper. Lydia was intelligent, well-spoken, and came from a family that understood the world he lived in. She knew how to behave at events, how to smile for cameras, how to talk without saying anything that might complicate his image. They didn't argue much. They didn't talk deeply either. Their relationship existed in the same way his schedule did, organized, polite, and easy to maintain. When people congratulated him, Ray nodded and said the right words. Inside, he felt nothing shift, no sense that anything real had changed. Marriage felt like another step on a ladder he had already decided to climb. Not a question, just a box to check. Tanya didn't fit into Ray's life the way Lydia did. She didn't follow schedules. She forgot meetings. She asked questions that didn't lead anywhere practical. Tanya talked about feelings the same way Ray talked about business, openly, without filters, without strategies. They had met by accident, through a friend who thought they might get along. At first, Ray had assumed she would be temporary, a distraction, a quiet escape from his routine. But Tanya stayed, not because he planned it, because she made him forget to plan at all. What Ray didn't notice at first was how uneven everything had become. He decided when they met. He decided when he left. He decided what parts of his life she was allowed to see. Tanya adjusted around him without complaining. She waited when he was late. She softened when he was distant. She listened when he talked about work, even when she didn't understand half of it. Ray called it flexibility. Tanya felt it as absence, but she never said it out loud, because loving him had started to feel like something she had to manage carefully, the way you handle something fragile, hoping it won't break if you hold it gently enough. There were moments Tanya tried to talk about the future, not in big plans, not in timelines, just small questions. Where do you see yourself in a few years? Do you ever think about slowing down? Do you want kids someday? Ray answered each one the same way, not with words, with distractions. He changed the subject, checked his phone, suggested they go out instead. Anything that kept the conversation from staying where it was. Because the future Tanya imagined required space for uncertainty. And uncertainty had no place in Ray's life. Ray liked being the one people depended on, not emotionally, practically. When problems appeared, they came to him. When decisions were needed, they waited for him. When plans failed, they asked him to fix them. It gave him a sense of weight in the world. If he was needed, he mattered. And if he mattered, then nothing could really threaten him. That was the story he told himself at least. Power felt like protection, and he held on to it the way people hold on to things they're afraid to lose. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't a fight. It was silence. Tanya stopped asking questions, stopped waiting by the window when he said he'd call, stopped making excuses for his absence. When Ray finally noticed, he assumed it meant everything was fine. No conflict, no complaints, no pressure. What he didn't realize was that Tanya hadn't become easier. She had become tired. And tired people don't argue. They prepare to leave. Ray still believed he was in charge of everything. His work was thriving. His engagement was stable. His life looked flawless from the outside. Even Tanya's growing distance felt manageable to him. He told himself she just needed time, that emotions always settled, that people adjusted when they cared enough. What Ray didn't see was the simple truth standing right in front of him. Nothing was actually under control. It only looked that way because no one had challenged him yet. And the moment someone finally did, everything he thought was solid would start to shift. Tanya had stopped leaving things at his apartment. No toothbrush in the bathroom, no spare clothes in the closet, no books on his nightstand, small things. The kind of things Ray never paid attention to because they didn't affect his schedule. But Tanya noticed. Every time she picked up her bag at the end of the night, she felt less like she belonged there and more like she was visiting a place she wasn't meant to stay. Ray still thought nothing had changed. He didn't understand that people don't always leave loudly. Sometimes they leave by making themselves smaller first. There was a night when Ray promised he would come by after work. Nothing special, just dinner. Tanya cooked anyway. She set the table for two, lit a small candle, left her phone on the counter face up. 9 o'clock passed, then 10, then 11. No message, no call. When Ray finally texted close to midnight, it was short. Got caught up. Tomorrow? Tanya stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Sure, but something inside her quietly closed that night, and Ray never noticed. After that night, Tanya stopped trying to make him understand her. She no longer said when she felt lonely, no longer asked if he cared. When Ray canceled plans, she smiled and said it was fine. When he forgot things, she said it didn't matter. Ray thought the relationship had become easier. In reality, Tanya had stopped expecting anything from him. And when someone stops expecting, they've already started letting go. They still spent time together. They still laughed at the same jokes. But something invisible had settled between them. A distance that wasn't measured in miles, but in attention. Ray was present physically. Tanya was present emotionally. And the space between those two things grew wider every day. Neither of them named it, because naming it would have meant admitting it was real. Do you ever think about what would happen if things didn't go the way you planned? Ray barely looked up from his phone. Things always go the way I plan, he replied. It wasn't arrogance, it was belief. Tanya studied him for a moment, as if she were trying to understand a language she no longer spoke. Not always, she said quietly. Ray smiled, half distracted. Enough of the time, he answered. And with that he returned to his screen. Tanya leaned back, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, realizing that the man she loved trusted his plans more than he trusted her. Ray sensed the change before he understood it. Not through words, not through arguments, through atmosphere. Tanya felt quieter around him, not distant in action, just softer in presence, like she was already learning how to exist without leaning on him. She laughed less at his jokes, looked at him less often when she spoke. Ray noticed it the way people notice weather. Something had shifted that he couldn't explain how or why, and because he couldn't name it, he assumed it wasn't important. He told himself relationships naturally settled into routines. That comfort replaced excitement. That silence meant stability. What he didn't realize was that the silence wasn't comfortable. It was cautious, the kind of quiet that forms when someone is deciding whether to stay. The night before Tanya told him she was pregnant, nothing seemed unusual. They had dinner, watched a show, talked about work. Ray complained about a meeting. Tanya listened. She almost told him. She felt the words sitting in her chest, waiting for a space to exist. But Ray checked his phone, answered an email, stood up to take a call. And the moment passed. Tanya realized something that night, not that he didn't care, but that he didn't know how to be present when it mattered. So she kept the secret one more day, and prepared herself for what might come next. When Ray left her apartment that night, he kissed her forehead, a habit. Automatic, unquestioned. Talk tomorrow, he said. Tanya nodded. She stood by the door after he left, hands still resting on the handle, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. In that quiet, she made a decision. Not about leaving, not about staying, about telling the truth, whatever it cost. Ray walked to his car believing nothing in his life had changed, not knowing he had just stepped away from the last moment where everything still could have been simple. The next morning, Ray woke up feeling unusually rested. No rush, no tension, no sense of urgency. He checked his phone. No missed calls, no emergencies, no problems waiting to be solved. For once, everything seemed perfectly aligned. Tanya, meanwhile, sat alone in her kitchen, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea, staring at the wall as if it might give her courage. Two people, two different mornings, one carrying calm, the other carrying a truth that would change both of their lives forever, and neither of them knew that this was the last ordinary day they would ever share. Tanya arrived at Ray's office without an appointment. She stood in the lobby for a few seconds, watching people move past her with purpose. Phones pressed to ears, badges swinging from their necks, conversations about things that suddenly felt very far away from her life. When the receptionist asked if she had a meeting scheduled, Tanya shook her head. "I just need 5 minutes," she said. "He'll understand." The receptionist hesitated, then made the call. A minute later, the elevator doors opened. Ray stepped out, already mid-thought, already distracted, and for the first time in their relationship, Tanya saw him not as her partner, but as a man she was about to change forever. Ray's office looked exactly the way Tanya remembered it. Clean, quiet, perfectly arranged, glass walls, a large desk, a view of the city that made everything outside feel small. He gestured for her to sit, already walking toward his desk, already reaching for his tablet. Tanya remained standing. "I won't take long." Ray looked up then, really looked at her. Her hands were clasped together, her shoulders were tense, her eyes held something he hadn't seen before. Not emotion, decision. And suddenly, the room felt smaller than it had a moment ago. Not a deep one, not a dramatic one, just enough to keep her voice steady. "I'm pregnant." The sentence didn't echo. It didn't shake the room. It simply existed between them. Ray blinked once, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. Then he let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "That's not possible," he said. "You're on birth control." Tanya nodded slowly. Ray leaned back against his desk, arms crossing without him realizing it. "But nothing is perfect," she added quietly. For the first time since she walked in, Ray said nothing, not because he didn't have words, but because none of the ones he knew how to use belonged to this moment. Silence settled between them, not awkward, not loud, just empty. Ray walked past her without speaking and stood by the glass wall, looking down at the city as if it might explain what had just entered his life. Cars moved in neat lines, people crossed streets, somewhere someone was laughing. Everything continued, except him. Tanya watched his reflection in the glass, the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands folded behind his back. He looked like a man trying to solve a problem that didn't belong to logic. After a long moment, he spoke. Not to her, to the space around them. "This isn't good timing." Ray turned to face her, his expression already shifting into something familiar. Calm, controlled, reasonable. "My career is at a critical point," he said. "Investors are watching everything I do. I'm engaged. This kind of situation creates complications I can't afford right now." He spoke as if he were reviewing a contract, as if the words were neutral, as if they didn't carry weight. Tanya felt her stomach tighten. "What about me?" she asked softly. Ray hesitated for just a second, then answered the question without really answering it. "We'll figure something out," but the way he said it sounded less like hope and more like strategy. Tanya waited for him to say more, for reassurance, for concern, for anything that sounded like he understood what this meant to her. Instead, Ray walked back to his desk and rested his hands on its edge, grounding himself in something solid. "You can't have this child," he said. The sentence was quiet, almost polite. Tanya stared at him, unsure she had heard correctly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ray met her eyes, not with anger, not with cruelty, with certainty. "This isn't something I can let happen," he continued. "It would destroy everything I've worked for." For a moment, Tanya forgot how to breathe, not because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it. Tanya's voice trembled, but she didn't raise it. "You don't get to decide that." Ray frowned slightly, as if she had misunderstood something obvious. "I'm not trying to control you," he said. "I'm being realistic." "Realistic about what?" she asked. "My life or yours?" He didn't answer right away. The space between them felt tighter now, like the room itself had narrowed. "I'm trying to protect what I've built," Ray finally said. "This changes everything." Tanya nodded slowly. Yes, she replied. It changes me too. Ray's voice lowered, not in volume but in tone. The kind of voice he used in boardrooms when he wanted people to listen carefully. You're not thinking clearly, he said. This isn't something you can handle alone. Tanya felt a chill move through her. I'm not alone, she replied. I'm standing right here. Ray shook his head slowly. If you go through with this, he said, you're going to lose everything. Your job, your stability, your future. People don't survive situations like this without support. Tanya realized with sudden clarity that he wasn't warning her. He was outlining consequences, and every consequence had his name written on it. Tanya felt her hand start to shake. Not from fear, from disbelief. You're talking like this is a business problem, she said. Not a human one. This is a human problem, he replied. And humans make mistakes. I'm trying to prevent one. Tanya's eyes filled, but her voice stayed calm. You mean you're trying to erase it? Ray looked away for a moment, then back at her. If you have this child, he said slowly, I will shatter your family, financially, socially, legally if I have to. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. He simply stated it. And that was what made it unbearable, because Tanya realized in that second that he wasn't speaking from emotion. Tanya stared at him as if she were seeing a stranger wearing Ray's face, not the man who used to listen to her stories, not the man who once held her hand in silence. This was someone else, someone who measured everything by loss and gain. I loved you, she said quietly. The words didn't accuse. They didn't beg. They simply landed. Ray didn't respond, not because he didn't hear her, but because there was nothing in his world that told him how to answer that sentence anymore. Tanya didn't wait for a reply. She picked up her bag from the chair she never sat in and walked toward the door. Her steps were slow but steady. Ray watched her leave, his reflection following her in the glass. She reached for the handle, paused for half a second, as if giving him one last chance to speak. He didn't, so she opened the door and walked out of his life without raising her voice once. The door clicked softly behind her. Not a slam, not a dramatic exit, just a quiet sound that somehow felt louder than anything else in the building. Ray remained standing where he was, eyes fixed on the space she had just occupied. For a moment, he expected her to come back, to say something else, to argue, to demand more. But the hallway stayed empty, and slowly an unfamiliar feeling settled in his chest. Not relief, not victory, something closer to absence, like a room that had just lost its only window. Ray sat down at his desk for the first time since she arrived. Not because he needed to, because his legs no longer felt reliable. The office felt different now, smaller, less impressive. The city outside the glass still moved, but it no longer felt connected to him. He checked his phone. No messages from Tanya, no missed calls, no sign that the moment had ever happened. And yet, everything in him felt altered. He tried to return to his work, opened a document, scrolled through emails, read the same sentence 3 times without understanding it. For the first time in years, his attention refused to obey him, because silence had replaced certainty, and silence asked questions he didn't know how to answer. By the end of the day, Ray had built a story for himself, a reasonable one. She was emotional. She needed time. She would come back once things settled. He told himself he had been honest. That honesty was better than false hope. That he had saved both of them from a difficult future. It sounded logical. It sounded clean. It even sounded kind, if he didn't think too deeply about it. And Ray had become very good at not thinking too deeply about things that made him uncomfortable. That night, Ray held his phone in his hand longer than usual. He opened Tanya's contact, closed it, opened it again. He thought about sending a message, something neutral, something safe, just enough to remind her he was still there. But every sentence he typed felt wrong, too soft, too distant, too late. So he placed the phone face down on the table and told himself he would reach out tomorrow. Tomorrow felt easier than now, and without realizing it, Ray made the same choice he had always made. He waited, not knowing that waiting was exactly how people lose the things they claim to care about. The next morning, Ray returned to his routine. Meetings, calls, coffee that tasted the same as always. No one at work mentioned Tanya. No one asked if he was okay. The world continued to treat him like nothing had changed, and on the surface, nothing had. But somewhere between one conversation and the next, Ray felt a quiet tension he couldn't place. Like he had missed something important. Not an appointment, a direction, and for the first time in his carefully ordered life, he wasn't sure whether the path he was walking still belonged to him. Tanya didn't go home after leaving the building. She walked for nearly an hour without checking her phone, letting the noise of the city blur around her. Her hands still trembled, but her thoughts felt strangely clear. Ray had made his position known, not through anger, not through confusion, through certainty. And certainty, she realized, was something she could finally trust. She stopped at a small cafe, sat by the window, and placed both hands over her stomach for the first time that day. "I choose you," she whispered. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. In that quiet moment, Tanya didn't feel strong. She felt calm, and calm, she understood, was stronger than fear. That evening, Tanya packed a single bag, not because she was running, because she was making space. She folded her clothes carefully, left the rest behind, and stood in the doorway of the apartment she and Ray had once shared without ever really sharing. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt final. She didn't cry, didn't hesitate, didn't look back for long. Somewhere inside her, a new kind of life had already begun to form, one that didn't ask for permission, approval, or protection, one that only needed her. And as Tanya closed the door behind her, she understood something with quiet certainty. The hardest part wasn't losing Ray. It was realizing she had been alone long before she ever walked away. Tanya stood in the middle of her apartment, looking at everything she wasn't taking: the couch they picked together, the plates Ray liked, the jacket he left on the back of the chair. None of it felt like hers anymore. She placed a single suitcase on the bed and began choosing carefully, not what she wanted, but what she needed. Clothes for different weather, important papers, a photo of her parents, a small notebook she used to write in when she felt overwhelmed. That was all. When she zipped the bag closed, the sound felt louder than it should have. Not because it marked an ending, but because it marked the first decision she had made in a long time that didn't revolve around someone else. Tanya didn't tell many people where she was going. Not because it was a secret, because she didn't want opinions. She booked a bus ticket to a small town in Oregon she had once passed through during college. She remembered it only for its quiet streets and a cafe that served soup that tasted like someone cared. That felt like enough of a reason. On the morning she left, the city looked the same as always: crowded sidewalks, car horns, people rushing toward things that mattered to them. No one noticed her standing at the terminal with one suitcase and a future that didn't include any familiar names. When the bus pulled away, Tanya didn't watch the buildings fade. She closed her eyes instead, and for the first time since she could remember, she allowed herself to breathe without waiting for someone else's reaction. The town looked smaller than Tanya remembered. One main street, a grocery store, a library that closed early. It didn't feel exciting. It felt manageable. She rented a tiny room above a bakery that smelled like warm bread in the mornings and sugar in the afternoons. The owner didn't ask many questions, just handed her the key and said, "We don't get many people passing through here. You'll like the quiet." Tanya wasn't sure if she would like it, but she knew she needed it. That first night, she sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds outside. Distant laughter, a train far away, wind moving through trees. No sirens, no traffic, no reminders of the life she had left. For the first time, she wasn't surrounded by noise. She was surrounded by space, and space, she realized, was exactly what she had been missing. Tanya found work the next morning, not the kind she had imagined for herself years ago, but the kind that paid quickly and asked few questions. A small diner on the corner needed help during the breakfast rush. The manager looked at her resume, glanced at her tired eyes, and said, "You can start tomorrow." The uniform didn't fit perfectly. The shoes were a size too big. The apron smelled faintly of coffee no matter how many times it was washed. But when Tanya tied it around her waist, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Useful. The work was simple: refilling cups, wiping counters. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, every dollar she earned felt like proof that she could survive on her own terms. By the end of the first week, one job wasn't enough. Rent was small but steady. Food was simple but necessary. And doctor visits were already beginning to appear on her calendar. So Tanya found a second job in the evenings, cleaning offices after hours. The buildings were quiet, empty of voices, filled only with the hum of lights and the sound of her footsteps on polished floors. She learned to move efficiently. Clock in at the diner at 6, clock out at 2, rest for an hour, clean until 10. Sleep, repeat. Some nights her legs ached so badly she lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the pain to soften. But she never considered quitting, because exhaustion felt easier than uncertainty. And every time she placed a hand over her stomach, she reminded herself why she was doing this. Not for comfort, not for security, for choice. The clinic was small and smelled faintly of disinfectant and old magazines. Tanya sat in the waiting room with her hands folded in her lap, watching a couple across from her argue quietly about parking. Somewhere behind a door, A baby cried, then stopped. When the nurse called her name, Tanya stood up slowly. The exam room felt colder than it needed to be. The doctor was kind, straightforward, asked gentle questions without prying. "How are you feeling?" she asked. Tanya thought about it for a second. "Tired," she said. "But okay." The doctor smiled. "That's a good start." As the heartbeat filled the room for the first time, soft and steady, Tanya felt her eyes burn, not from fear, from the strange realization that something was already depending on her, and she wasn't alone anymore, even if she was doing this by herself. That night, Tanya lay awake in her small bed, one hand resting gently over her stomach. The room was dark, lit only by a street lamp outside the window and the faint glow of her phone on the nightstand. She thought about Ray, not with anger, not with longing, just as a chapter that had already closed. Then she thought about the heartbeat she had heard that afternoon, soft, steady, real. "I don't know how I'll do this," she whispered into the quiet room, "but I will." There was no audience for the promise, no one to confirm it or hold her to it, just her, and the life growing inside her. For the first time, Tanya didn't feel like she was running away from something. She felt like she was finally running toward someone. Labor started on a Tuesday morning. Tanya had just finished her shift at the diner when the pain arrived, sudden and sharp, enough to make her grip the edge of the counter until the room steadied again. A coworker drove her to the hospital. The hours blurred, bright lights, quiet instructions, hands helping her breathe when she forgot how. There was no one else in the room. No partner, no family, no familiar face, just Tanya and the steady presence of strangers who treated her with care. When the baby finally arrived, small and warm and crying, the nurse placed her gently in Tanya's arms. And Tanya cried too, not from pain, from the overwhelming weight of love she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. "Hi," she whispered, and for the first time in months, she felt like everything she had endured suddenly made sense. Tanya held the baby close, afraid that if she loosened her arms even slightly, the moment might disappear. The nurse asked gently, "Have you chosen a name?" Tanya hadn't planned one, not because she didn't care, because every name she thought of before felt tied to a future that no longer existed. She looked down at the tiny face resting against her chest. The baby's eyes were closed, her breathing uneven, her fingers curling and uncurling as if she were still learning how to exist. Annika. The name came quietly, without effort. It meant grace, it meant kindness, it meant new beginnings. "I think her name is Anika," Tanya said. The nurse smiled. "It suits her." Tanya repeated it softly, testing the sound. Anika. And just like that, the world felt more real, more solid, more alive, because now it had someone in it who belonged only to her. The hospital room felt too quiet after the nurses left. No machines beeping, no footsteps in the hallway, just Tanya sitting in a chair, holding Annika against her chest, afraid to fall asleep in case something changed while her eyes were closed. Annika made small sounds in her sleep, tiny breaths that didn't follow any rhythm yet. Tanya watched everyone. She counted them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. Her body ached. Her head felt heavy. But she didn't move. Because for the first time in her life, rest felt less important than presence. She leaned her head back against the wall and whispered, "I'm right here." Not as a promise, as a fact. They were discharged 2 days later. Tanya carried Annika out of the hospital wrapped in a borrowed blanket, her arms stiff with fear and care at the same time. The sky was bright, too bright. The world looked unchanged, which felt strange considering everything inside her had shifted. A taxi took them back to the tiny room above the bakery. When Tanya unlocked the door, the space felt even smaller than before. One bed, one chair, one narrow window. She placed Anika gently on the mattress and stood there for a moment, unsure what to do next. There was no one to tell her she was doing it right, no one to correct her, no one to take over, just her, and a quiet room that now held an entire future. The first weeks blurred together. Anika slept in short stretches, woke without warning. Some nights Tanya walked the length of the small room for hours, rocking gently, whispering nonsense just to keep herself awake. She learned quickly which cries meant hunger. Her body adjusted before her mind did. Sleep became something she borrowed in pieces. Meals became whatever she could eat with one hand. Time lost its shape. But in the middle of the exhaustion, something steady formed. Not perfect, not easy, just real. And every time Anika finally settled against her chest, Tanya felt a quiet certainty return. She might not know everything, but she was learning enough. Money became something Tanya counted carefully, not in big numbers, in small ones. How many hours she needed to work for a box of diapers, how many shifts paid for formula, how many nights of cleaning covered rent. She learned to stretch everything. Leftovers turned into new meals, old clothes became cleaning rags. Shoes were worn until the soles thinned. Some weeks she stood in the grocery aisle longer than necessary, calculating in her head, choosing between things she wanted and things she needed. She always chose need, not because she was strong, because Anika was small and needed everything. And slowly, Tanya began to understand something she had never learned in her old life. Freedom wasn't comfort. It was responsibility. And responsibility, though heavy, felt more honest than anything she had ever been given before. The nights were the hardest, when the town went quiet, when the bakery lights turned off, when there were no voices left to distract her. Anika often woke just after midnight, crying in a way that felt different from the daytime. Not urgent, not loud, just lonely. Tanya would sit on the edge of the bed, rocking slowly, humming songs she barely remembered the words to. Sometimes she cried too, not because she regretted anything, because being needed so completely was heavier than she had expected. In those quiet hours, she didn't miss Ray. She missed rest. She missed certainty. She missed the version of herself that used to exist without thinking about another heartbeat first. But every time Anika finally fell asleep against her chest, Tanya felt something settle inside her. The nights were long, but they were theirs. And somehow, that made the darkness feel less empty. Not every day felt heavy. Some days Anika smiled for no reason at all. A real smile, wide, sudden, like she had discovered something wonderful about the world and wanted to share it immediately. The first time it happened, Tanya froze. She leaned closer, unsure if it was just a reflex. Then Anika did it again, and Tanya laughed out loud to sound surprising even herself. It wasn't a big moment. No one else witnessed it. There was no photo, just a mother and her child sitting on a bed above a bakery, smiling at each other for no reason except that they existed in the same space. From then on, Tanya started noticing the small things, the way Anika's fingers wrapped around hers, the way she fell asleep mid-feed, the tiny sounds she made when she dreamed. They didn't erase the exhaustion, but they softened it, like quiet reminders that not everything meaningful needed to be loud, planned, or shared. Some of the best parts of life arrived gently, and stayed only if you paid attention. As Anika grew, her curiosity arrived early, in the way her eyes followed everything Tanya did. She stared at the ceiling fan as if it were a miracle, reached for sunlight on the wall, listened to voices with serious attention. By the time she learned her first real word, Tanya wasn't even sure what she hoped it would be. Mommy. It came one afternoon while Tanya was folding laundry. Tanya dropped a shirt on the floor and turned. What did you say? Anika smiled, proud of herself. The word felt heavier than any title Tanya had ever carried, not because of what it meant, because of what it required. From that moment on, Tanya understood that every version of herself would now be measured against one simple question. Am I being the person my child believes I am? The question arrived one evening without warning. They were sitting on the floor, playing with plastic blocks that Anika kept stacking and knocking over again. Anika paused suddenly and looked up. Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. Where's my daddy? Tanya felt her breath catch, not because she hadn't prepared for this moment, because no amount of preparation could make it easy. She didn't rush to answer. She placed the blocks aside and sat closer. He made some choices, Tanya said gently. And so did I. Anika frowned, trying to understand something too big for her age. Is he gone? Tanya nodded slowly. He's not here, she replied. But you are loved. Very much. Anika accepted this with the quiet seriousness only children carry. She leaned into Tanya's side and picked up a block. Okay, she said. And just like that, the world continued, not because the answer was perfect, but because it was honest. Years passed without Tanya marking them. Not in milestones, not in achievements, in routines, morning breakfasts, evening baths, small walks through town. She didn't become rich. She didn't become famous. She became steady. And one afternoon, while watching Anika run ahead of her toward the park, laughing at something invisible, Tanya felt a quiet realization settle in. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was living, not the life she had once imagined, but one she had built with her own hands, without fear, without permission, without anyone telling her what she was allowed to choose. For the first time, Tanya didn't feel like she had lost anything. She felt like she had gained something rare, a life that belonged to her, and a child who grew up never once feeling unwanted. Anika grew up believing the world was kind, not because it always was, because her mother made it feel that way. Their morning started slowly. Tanya would wake Anika with a gentle kiss on the forehead, whispering her name as if it were something precious. Breakfast was usually simple, toast, fruit, whatever fit the week's budget, but Anika treated every meal like an event. She talked to her cereal, named the birds outside the window, asked questions before Tanya had fully opened her eyes. To Anika, life wasn't something to rush through. It was something to notice, and without realizing it, Tanya built a small universe around her daughter where curiosity was encouraged, mistakes were forgiven, and love was never in doubt. Annika didn't know what she didn't have. She only knew what she was given, and what she was given was enough to make her feel safe in a world she had just started to understand. Annika's favorite thing in the world was asking why. Why the sky changed colors, why dogs wagged their tails, why people waved even when they didn't know each other. Some questions were easy. Others made Tanya pause. Mommy, why is the moon following us? Because it likes to make sure we get home safe. Mommy, do people fall in love forever? Tanya smiled softly. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they learn different ways to love. Annika accepted every answer as truth, not because they were perfect, because they were spoken with care. And Tanya learned something in those moments. She didn't need to know everything about the world. She just needed to give her daughter enough honesty to feel secure inside it. Annika had a way of noticing things other people ignored. She noticed when someone looked tired, when a cashier sounded sad, when a classmate sat alone. Once at the grocery store, she tugged on Tanya's sleeve and whispered, "That lady looks lonely." Tanya followed her gaze to an older woman standing quietly near the exit. Before Tanya could respond, Annika walked over and offered her a smile. "Hi," she said. "I like your scarf." The woman's face softened instantly. "Thank you," she replied. "That's very kind of you." Annika returned to Tanya, satisfied, as if she had completed an important task. Later, as they walked home, Tanya asked, "Why did you talk to her?" Annika shrugged. Because she needed someone. Tanya felt something tighten, gently in her chest. She had spent years trying to protect her daughter from the world. Without realizing it, she had raised someone who wanted to protect it back. Annika didn't know how to lie. Not convincingly, anyway. If she broke something, she admitted it. If she felt sad, she said it. If she liked someone, she showed it without hesitation. Once after school, Tanya asked how her day had been. Annika frowned. "I didn't like it," she said. "Why not?" "My friend didn't want to play with me." Tanya waited for the rest of the story. Annika continued, "So I played by myself. It was okay, but I felt a little heavy." Tanya smiled gently. "A little heavy?" Annika nodded seriously, like my heart needed a nap. Tanya laughed softly and pulled her into a hug. In that moment, Tanya realized something rare. Her daughter wasn't learning how to hide her feelings. She was learning how to name them. And that kind of honesty would protect her far better than silence ever could. Annika saw stories everywhere. A cardboard box became a spaceship. A puddle turned into an ocean. A fallen leaf became a treasure. She narrated her own adventures out loud, speaking to imaginary characters with full seriousness. "Captain Annika reporting," she would say, standing on the couch. "We are going to save the kittens." Tanya watched these moments with quiet amusement. Sometimes she joined in. Sometimes she just listened. Annika didn't need an audience. She needed space to believe that ordinary things could be magical if you paid enough attention. And slowly, Tanya realized that her daughter wasn't escaping reality. She was reshaping it, turning a simple world into one filled with meaning, joy, and possibility, not because life was perfect, but because she chose to see it that way. Annika's first day of school felt bigger to Tanya than it did to Annika. Tanya held her hand tightly on the walk there, trying not to show how nervous she felt. Annika, on the other hand, skipped ahead. "Do you think they'll have crayons?" she asked. "They probably will," Tanya said. "Good," Annika replied, "because I need purple for my dragon." The classroom was bright and full of noise. Children laughed. Backpacks dropped. Teachers called out names. Annika let go of Tanya's hand without hesitation and walked straight into the room. Tanya stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her daughter blend into the crowd. It was pride. Because Annika wasn't afraid of new spaces, she trusted the world. And Tanya knew exactly why. Annika didn't try to be brave. She simply didn't know how to be afraid in the way adults were. When she fell, she stood back up. When she was wrong, she asked questions. When something felt confusing, she looked for help instead of hiding. Once a boy in her class laughed at her drawing. Annika looked at the paper, then at him. "I like it," she said calmly. The boy shrugged, unsure what to do with that answer. Later, Tanya asked if it had hurt her feelings. Annika thought about it for a moment. "A little," she admitted, "but I still like my dragon." Tanya realized then that her daughter was learning something most people took decades to understand. Confidence didn't come from being perfect. It came from being okay with who you already were. Evenings were their favorite time. After homework and dinner, they would sit together on the small couch, sometimes reading, sometimes watching old movies, sometimes just talking about nothing important. Annika liked to lie across Tanya's lap, asking questions while playing with her fingers. "What's your favorite color, Mommy?" "Probably blue. Why?" "It reminds me of calm." Annika nodded as if this made perfect sense. Sometimes Annika would fall asleep mid-sentence, her voice slowing, her eyes closing while Tanya continued brushing her hair. Those moments felt fragile, not because they might disappear, because Tanya knew they would change. One day, Annika wouldn't fit on her lap anymore. One day she wouldn't ask as many questions. So Tanya held those quiet evenings gently, not trying to freeze them, just grateful to be inside them while they lasted. There was one question Annika never asked often, but it never really went away either. It appeared quietly, usually when Tanya least expected it, on a walk home from school, during a lazy Sunday afternoon, while brushing her teeth before bed. "Mommy," Annika would say, as if it were just another thought. "Where's my daddy?" The first few times Tanya felt her heart tighten, not because she didn't have an answer, because she didn't want the answer to hurt. She always kept it simple. "He made choices," she would say, "and so did I." Annika accepted this, the same way she accepted most things, slowly, thoughtfully, without resistance. But Tanya noticed something. Annika never asked with sadness. She asked with curiosity, like someone trying to understand a missing piece of a puzzle, not someone feeling incomplete. And that told Tanya something important. Her daughter didn't feel abandoned. She felt secure enough to ask questions without fear of what the answers might mean. One night, as they lay in bed listening to rain tap gently against the window, Annika asked a different kind of question. "Mommy, do people fall in love forever?" Tanya paused, not because she didn't know what to say, because she wanted the answer to be honest. "Sometimes," she said, "sometimes they fall in love for a long time, and sometimes they learn new ways to love." Annika considered this. "So love doesn't go away?" "No," Tanya replied softly, "it just changes shape." "That's good," she said. "I don't want love to disappear." Tanya kissed her forehead. Neither of them knew how many times that idea would matter later. That love could exist without being perfect, that love could change without being lost, and that believing in it was, in its own way, an act of hope. Annika had a habit of listening with her whole body. When someone spoke, she stopped what she was doing, turned her face toward them, waited without interrupting. Her teachers noticed it first. "She's very attentive," one of them told Tanya. "She really hears people." At home, it meant Annika remembered small things, what kind of tea her neighbor liked. Once, after a long day, Tanya sighed without meaning to. Annika looked up from her drawing. "Do you want to talk or just sit?" she asked. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. Annika shrugged. "From you." And in that moment, Tanya understood something quietly powerful. Her daughter wasn't just growing up. She was paying attention to how to treat people. There were things Annika never questioned. Why there was only one adult at school events. Why Tanya always stood alone during parent meetings. Why no one else picked her up from practice. To Annika, this was simply normal. Her world didn't feel empty. It felt complete. She didn't compare her life to others because she had nothing to measure it against. By how often she laughed, by how much she was loved, and in those ways she felt rich. Tanya watched other families sometimes, couples holding hands, children being passed between two parents, and wondered if Annika would ever feel something missing. But Annika never looked around with longing. She looked forward, and Tanya realized that children don't need perfect structures. They need consistent love. And Annika had never known a day without it. Annika trusted easily, not recklessly, genuinely. She trusted that Tanya would come back when she said she would. Trusted that problems could be talked through. Trusted that mistakes didn't mean rejection. Once, she lost her favorite toy at the park. Tanya searched with her for nearly an hour. When they couldn't find it, Annika didn't cry. She took Tanya's hand and said, "It's okay. Maybe someone else needed it more." Tanya felt her eyes sting. Not because of the toy, because her daughter believed the world worked on kindness, not loss. That belief didn't come from luck. It came from years of being met with patience instead of fear. Annika didn't trust because she hadn't been hurt. She trusted because she had been held gently enough to believe hurt didn't define her. One afternoon, while they were walking home from the library, Annika slowed her steps. "Mommy," she said, "do you think my daddy would like me?" Tanya stopped walking, not because she was shocked, because the question felt heavier than all the others. She knelt in front of Annika and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I think anyone who met you would like you," she said honestly. Annika smiled at that. "Even him?" Tanya held her daughter's hands. "Yes," she said softly, "even him." Annika nodded, satisfied. Tanya stood back up and continued walking, her heart carrying a quiet ache she never showed. Not because Annika felt incomplete, but because Tanya knew one day the answer to that question might finally matter. Annika loved Tanya in small, constant ways, not with grand gestures, not with dramatic words, with presence. She waited by the window when Tanya worked late, held her hand in public even when she didn't need to. Once, during a school event, Annika introduced Tanya to her teacher. "This is my mom," she said proudly. "She's the best person I know." Tanya laughed it off, embarrassed. But Annika meant it seriously. To her, Tanya wasn't a single parent. She wasn't someone who struggled or sacrificed. She was simply the person who showed up every day. And to a child, that kind of love didn't need explanation. It didn't need comparison. It just existed, steady, quiet, and unquestioned. One morning, while getting ready for school, Anika stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than usual. She tilted her head, smiled, made a serious face. Tanya watched from the doorway. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm checking who I look like," Anika replied. Tanya smiled. "And?" Anika considered it carefully. "I look like you," she said, "but also like someone I don't know." Tanya's breath caught slightly. "What do you mean?" Anika shrugged. "My eyes feel like yours, but my smile feels different, like it belongs to someone else too." Tanya walked over and stood beside her. They looked at their reflections together. Two faces, different ages, same warmth. "You're allowed to look like many people," Tanya said gently. "It just means you're made of more than one story." Anika nodded, satisfied. She didn't feel confused. She felt curious. And Tanya realized that her daughter wasn't searching for something missing. She was simply learning who she was allowed to become. The question came one evening when they were doing homework at the kitchen table. Anika was supposed to be practicing spelling, but she kept staring at the same word without writing it. Tanya noticed. "Everything okay?" she asked. Anika nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. "Mommy, can I ask you something without you being sad?" Tanya felt a quiet tightening in her chest. "You can always ask me anything," she said. Anika took a breath, the way adults did when they were preparing for something important. "Just honest." Tanya didn't rush her answer. She reached across the table and held Anika's hand. "I think people think about the things they're not brave enough to face," she said gently. "And sometimes that means they think more than we realize." Anika considered this. "So he might think about me?" "Yes," Tanya said. "I believe he does." Anika smiled softly, not with hope, not with sadness, just understanding. And Tanya realized something quietly powerful in that moment. Her daughter wasn't searching for a person. She was searching for reassurance that she mattered. And she already had it. Years passed the same way they always had, quietly, not marked by big achievements or dramatic changes, but by everyday moments that layered themselves into something solid and real. Morning walks to school, shared lunches on busy days, evenings on the couch, legs tangled, talking about nothing important. Anika grew taller, smarter, more thoughtful. But one thing never changed. She never felt alone. She never doubted she was wanted, never questioned whether she belonged, never wondered if she had been a mistake. Her world was small, but it was full of laughter, full of trust, full of a kind of love that didn't need to compete with anything else to feel complete. And Tanya realized, watching her daughter one afternoon as she ran ahead toward the park, turning back only to make sure her mother was still there, that whatever else Anika might one day discover about her life, her past, or her father, nothing could ever replace the truth she had grown up inside. She was loved without conditions, and sometimes that kind of love was enough to shape an entire future on its own. Ray came to Oregon for work, not curiosity, not nostalgia, business. His company was expanding into smaller markets, and someone decided his presence would make the investors feel important. Ray agreed without thinking much about it. He didn't like small towns. They moved too slowly, asked too many quiet questions, reminded him of things he preferred not to examine. So when he checked into the hotel and saw nothing but trees outside his window, he felt restless instead of relaxed. On the second afternoon, with an hour to kill before a meeting, he decided to go for a walk, just to clear his head, just to pass time. He didn't know he was about to step into the one place where time had been waiting for him instead. The park was simple. A fountain in the center, a few benches, children running in loose circles, no grand design, no crowds, no reason for it to matter. Ray walked slowly, phone in his hand, barely paying attention to where he was going. He wasn't looking for anything, which is why it felt strange when something suddenly pulled his focus without asking. A laugh. Not loud, not dramatic, just familiar. Ray looked up. A woman was sitting on a bench near the fountain, leaning forward slightly, laughing at something a child had said. At first he didn't place her. Then she tilted her head, slightly to the left, the same way she always used to. His steps slowed, then stopped. Tanya Howell. He hadn't said her name out loud in years, but his body recognized her before his mind could argue. Ray's eyes shifted, from Tanya's face to the small hand wrapped around hers. A little girl, dark hair, bright shoes, a cookie smudge on her cheek. The child looked up at Tanya with complete trust. This wasn't just any child. This child existed where his life had chosen not to. The girl smiled, but Ray still felt it land, the shape of her face, the curve of her mouth, the way she leaned into her mother. He didn't need proof. He didn't need numbers or timelines. Some truths arrived without explanation, and this one didn't ask for permission to be real. Ray tried to breathe, tried to form a thought that made sense. There had to be another story, another explanation that didn't involve him standing in the middle of a park staring at a life he had once tried to erase. But every thought he reached for fell apart before it finished forming. That's how long it had been. And in those 4 years something had grown without him. Something alive, something human, something smiling. Ray took a step, then another, not confidently, not intentionally. His body moved before his mind could stop it. Tanya was brushing crumbs off the child's jacket, smiling softly, completely unaware of the past standing a few feet behind her. Ray opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The words existed somewhere inside him, tangled with disbelief and memory and regret. But they refused to rise. For a moment, Ray felt unreal, like someone watching his own life from outside. The joggers passed. The fountain kept moving. The world continued as if nothing extraordinary was happening. But Ray couldn't move. This was the moment. The one where everything either changed or stayed broken forever, and he didn't know which sentence belonged to which future. Tanya began to turn, just slightly, as if she sensed something behind her. This was it. The second he had imagined and avoided for years. He wondered, suddenly and uselessly, what he should say first. Her name, an apology, nothing at all. Then the child looked at him first, and the girl smiled. It wasn't cautious, it wasn't curious, it was open. The kind of smile that assumed the world was kind, because no one had taught her otherwise. Ray felt something inside him give way. He had seen hundreds of people smile at him before. None of those smiles had ever carried weight. This one did, because this smile didn't know who he was. It didn't know what he had done. The girl's lips moved again. Then they returned, and stopped. The kind that arrives when a door you thought was closed appears open again. "Ray," she said quietly. No one spoke. Not Ray, not Tanya, not the child. The sounds of the park returned slowly, distant laughter, footsteps, water moving. But they felt far away. Ray realized he had rehearsed many conversations in his mind over the years. None of them had prepared him for this silence. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't warm. It was heavy with everything they had never said. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. It was just her name. Tanya. She didn't respond. She looked at him as if she were checking whether he was real or just another memory trying to return without permission. The child squeezed her hand. "Who is that?" Annika asked gently. Tanya looked down at her daughter. "Not at Ray. Someone I used to know," she said. Her voice was calm, not cold, not warm, just honest. Ray felt the weight of the words settle over him. Not someone important, not someone special, just someone from a past that no longer had power over the present. And somehow, that hurt more than anger ever could. Annika studied Ray again. "You look sad," she said simply. No judgment, no curiosity. Just an observation. Ray felt the words land deeper than any accusation ever could. He knelt slightly, unsure why, only knowing that standing felt impossible. Annika smiled again. Ray wanted to ask 1,000 things. Is she mine? Does she know? Do I have any right to stand here? But none of those questions felt allowed. Not yet. Not here. Not with a child whose world didn't include his mistakes, and quiet, for the first time in his life, felt honest. Annika tugged Tanya's hand again. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. Tanya hesitated. "Okay." They started to walk, and Ray realized something terrifying. They were about to leave. This moment wasn't waiting for him. He stood there, watching the life he had once rejected begin to walk away. "Wait," Ray said. For the first time, Ray didn't speak from power. He didn't speak from fear. He spoke from something smaller. "I don't know what I'm allowed to say," he admitted, "but I don't want to disappear again." Tanya looked at him for a long moment, not with anger, not with hope, with something harder. Memory. "This isn't about what you want anymore," she said gently. "It's about what you're willing to become." And in that moment, Ray understood something he had never learned before. Some mistakes don't fade. They wait, and eventually they ask whether you are brave enough to face what you left behind. Ray didn't follow them, not immediately. He stood in the park long after Tanya and Annika disappeared down the path, replaying every second in his mind, like it might change if he looked at it differently. That night, in his hotel room, he opened his phone. He stared at Tanya's name for a long time, then typed one sentence. "I'm in town for a few days. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk." He just waited. For the first time in his life, he waited without knowing what he deserved. The message came the next morning. 3 words. "We can meet." No emotion, No warmth, no rejection, just permission. Ray read it several times, unsure whether to feel relieved or afraid. He suggested a cafe near the park. Neutral ground, public, safe. Tanya agreed. And suddenly, a conversation he had avoided for 4 years had a place and a time. Ray arrived early. He chose a table near the window and sat with his hands folded, watching strangers walk past with coffees and newspapers and ordinary lives. His phone buzzed. "We're 5 minutes away. We." The word felt heavier than anything else she had written. Ray stood up before he realized he was doing it, then sat back down, then stood again. He didn't know what to do with his body, only that every part of him was aware this wasn't a business meeting. This was a reckoning. Tanya arrived first. Annika stayed outside with a woman from the park, someone Tanya trusted to watch her for a short while. Tanya walked into the cafe alone. Not nervous, not hesitant, just steady. Ray stood instinctively. "Tanya," she nodded. They sat, 2 people across from a table that suddenly felt much too small for everything between them. Neither of them spoke at first. A server came and took their orders. Coffee for both. Default choices. Safe choices. When the server left, the silence returned. Not the awkward kind, the honest kind. "I came for clarity," she said. "Not comfort." Ray nodded slowly. "I don't expect anything," he said. I didn't know she existed." That's fair. No argument. No defense. Just acceptance. And somehow that made the moment heavier. "You told me not to exist," Tanya said calmly. Ray's hands tightened around his cup. "I was afraid," he said. "No," she replied gently. "You were selfish." Ray didn't correct her, because for the first time he didn't need to protect his image. He needed to face his reflection. "I'm not here to be a hero," Ray said. I want to know her, even if it's from far away." Tanya studied him carefully. "You don't get to appear when it's emotionally convenient," she said. "This isn't a story about your growth." "I know," Ray replied. "It's about her, and about me," Tanya added. Ray nodded. "Yes, about you too." Tanya leaned back slightly. "If you want to be involved, it happens slowly," she said. "No sudden promises, no big gestures, no confusion." Ray listened without interrupting. "You don't tell her anything yet. You don't explain anything until I decide she's ready. I'll follow your lead." Tanya raised an eyebrow. "You never used to do that." "I know," he said. "That's part of why we're here." Ray hesitated before speaking again. "I know. I stopped being angry years ago," she replied. "Anger needs energy. I had to save mine for someone else." Ray understood. For Annika. And for the first time he felt the full weight of what it meant to arrive late to a life that had already learned how to continue without him. "I won't confuse her," Ray said. "I won't pressure her. I won't pressure you." Tanya nodded. "Then we can start with small things," she replied. "Ice cream, walks, homework, normal moments, normal." The word felt impossible and hopeful at the same time. Ray smiled faintly. "I can do normal." Tanya looked at him. They finished their coffee in silence. Just thoughtful. When they stood to leave, Tanya paused. "She's outside," she said. "If you want to say hello again." "Yes," he said quickly. Only if that's okay." "It's okay." Not because she trusted him fully, but because she trusted herself. Annika looked up when they stepped outside. "Hi," she said, recognizing Ray immediately. Ray smiled. "Hi." She studied him. "You still look sad," she said. Ray laughed softly. "Maybe a little less than before." Annika nodded, satisfied. Tanya watched them from a short distance, just observing the beginning of something she had never planned to allow. "Do you want to walk with us?" she asked. Ray looked at Tanya. She didn't answer for him. She waited. Ray knelt slightly. "I'd like that," he said, "if you're okay with it." Annika smiled. "I am," and just like that the hardest part wasn't the past. It was the present. Learning how to exist gently inside a world that didn't need him but might allow him. They walked to the ice cream shop together. No explanations. No labels. No dramatic conversations. Learning her rhythm. For once he didn't try to lead. He followed. As they sat on a bench eating ice cream, Annika looked at Ray. "You don't talk like other grown-ups," she said. Ray smiled. "Is that good or bad?" "Good," she replied. "Other grown-ups talk like they already know everything. I definitely don't." "Then you can stay." Tanya felt something shift inside her chest. Not trust. Not forgiveness. Possibility. "But if you're here," Tanya continued, "it has to be because you're willing to add to it, not control it." Ray met her eyes. I don't want to own anything anymore, he said. I just want to be present. Tanya studied him, then said, that's a start. There was no hug, no kiss, no dramatic reconciliation. Just three people standing in a park as the evening light softened around them. Ray didn't get his old life back. He got something harder. A chance to earn a new one. And Tanya realized something important as she watched Anika laugh between them. It was a responsibility story, and for the first time Ray seemed ready to carry it. Ray didn't text Tanya that night. He waited until the next morning, staring at his phone longer than he cared to admit. Finally he typed, good morning. I just wanted to say thank you again for yesterday. No pressure, no request, no hidden meaning. Tanya replied an hour later. Good morning. We're heading to the park later. Not an invitation, not a rejection, just information. Ray read the message 3 times, and for the first time in his life, he felt something unfamiliar. He wasn't in control. He was being allowed. At the park, Anika spotted him first. She waved like she had known him forever. Hi again? Ray smiled and waved back, unsure how close to stand, where to put his hands, how loud his voice should be. Hi. Anika ran back to the swings. Come push me. Ray looked at Tanya. She gave a small nod. Permission. Ray pushed the swing too hard at first. Ray realized something quietly. He wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of doing something wrong, and that fear felt different from anything he had ever known, because this time, the stakes weren't his reputation. They were someone else's safety. A few days later, Tanya invited him to join them for ice cream. Again, she gasped. Ray felt something warm settle in his chest, something gentler, connection. You're making it hard. Ray paused. How? One question at a time. Short sentences, lots of listening. Anika smiled. That's better. Ray learned something that day. Teaching wasn't about being smart. It was about being patient. Ray began to notice small things. The way Anika lined up her shoes perfectly by the door. The way she hummed while drawing. Anika didn't need guidance. She needed reassurance. And Tanya gave it without effort. Ray realized that he wasn't entering an empty space. He was stepping into a world that already worked. His role wasn't to fix anything. It was to fit gently. One afternoon, Ray promised to come by after work. A meeting ran late, then another. It wasn't okay. It was a warning. And this time, he listened. Ray began blocking time in his calendar. Not flexible time, protected time. He turned down meetings, rescheduled calls, left work earlier. For the first time, something mattered more than momentum. Anika noticed. You come a lot now, she said one evening. Ray smiled. I like being here. Anika nodded, just presence being noticed. One night while they were walking home, Anika looked up at him. Ray stopped walking. Not because he didn't want to answer, because he didn't want to lie. I'm someone who should have been braver, he said slowly, then nodded. My mom says brave people come back. Ray felt his throat tighten. He had spent years believing bravery meant control. For the first time, he understood it meant return. Anika began leaving her toys at his place. Not intentionally, just forgetting them. A drawing on his table, a sweater on his chair, a book under his bed. Small signs, unspoken permission. Ray didn't move anything. He left it exactly where it was, like proof he was allowed to keep something that didn't belong only to him. Anika woke up shaking with a fever. Tanya tried everything. Water, medicine, cold cloth. Nothing worked. Ray stayed, not because he knew what to do, because leaving didn't feel possible. He sat on the floor by the bed, holding Anika's hand while Tanya finally slept in the chair, exhausted. Anika whispered, Don't leave again. Ray replied without hesitation. I won't, not as a promise, as a decision. Anika's fever broke by morning. She woke up hungry, asking for pancakes. Ray burned the first batch, then the second. The third one was edible. Anika smiled. These are funny. Ray laughed. Are they good? They're brave, she said. Ray didn't ask what that meant. He felt it. Soon, Ray was part of the rhythm. School pickups, doctor visits, weekend walks, again and again. And slowly, that became enough. Tanya noticed first. You're not trying to manage everything anymore, she said one evening. Ray thought about it. I don't want to manage, he replied. I want to be here. Tanya studied him. Not with doubt, with recognition. She had waited years for him to say something like that. Started to cry. Ray rushed over. Tanya stayed seated, not because she didn't care, because she trusted him. Ray knelt, cleaned the wound, listened. Anika stopped crying quickly. Can I play again? She asked. Ray smiled. Yes. Tanya watched from the bench, not surprised, just relieved. Ray didn't talk about Anika at work. He didn't post photos. He didn't tell dramatic stories. But his schedule changed. His priorities shifted. His voice softened. The people around him noticed. They just didn't know why, and for once Ray didn't need to explain. Some things were better lived than described. One night, Ray admitted something to Tanya. I'm scared. Of what? Of doing this wrong. Tanya smiled gently. That means you're already doing it differently. Ray nodded. Fear wasn't weakness anymore, it was awareness. And awareness felt like growth. Ray once believed being a father meant authority. Now he understood something else. It meant listening, waiting, apologizing, showing up even when no one asked. He hadn't been given a role, he had been given a chance. And for the first time in his life, Ray wasn't trying to become someone impressive. He was trying to become someone reliable, which, he realized quietly, was far harder and far more meaningful. The call came just after midnight. Ray was still awake, scrolling through emails he didn't need to answer when his phone buzzed. Tanya, he answered immediately. Annika has a fever, Tanya said. Her voice was calm but thin. It's high. I can't get it down. Ray was already standing. I'm coming. He didn't ask if she wanted him to, didn't think about what he should bring. He just grabbed his keys and left. The streets were empty. Traffic lights changed for no one. Storefronts slept behind dark windows. Ray drove faster than he should have, one hand tight on the steering wheel, the other checking his phone for updates. He had never felt time move like this before. Not slow, not fast, urgent, like something important was happening without his permission. Tanya opened the door before he knocked. Her hair was tied back loosely. Her eyes were tired. She's in bed, she said. Ray stepped inside quietly, as if the apartment itself might be fragile. The room smelled faintly of medicine and warm blankets. Ray had been in boardrooms, at midnight, in airports at dawn. None of that felt as serious as this small hallway leading to one small room. Annika lay curled under the covers, cheeks flushed, breathing uneven. Ray sat on the edge of the bed without speaking. He touched her forehead, too warm. Annika opened her eyes. Hi, she whispered. Ray swallowed. Hi, I'm here. She smiled faintly, then closed her eyes again. They tried everything. Cold cloths, medicine, water in small sips. The fever stayed. Hours passed in quiet tension. Tanya sat in the chair by the window. Ray stayed on the floor near the bed, holding Annika's hand. No one spoke much. There were no words that improved anything. Only presence. Around 3 a.m, Tanya's eyes closed without her realizing it. She had been awake since dawn. Ray noticed first. He stood slowly and covered her with a blanket. Annika stirred. You're still here? She murmured. Yes, Ray said. She nodded, satisfied. Annika's hand tightened around his. Don't leave again, she whispered. The words weren't dramatic. They were simple, like a request for water. Ray felt his chest tighten. I won't, he said quietly, even if your mom stops liking me. She had already fallen asleep again. Tanya woke up just long enough to hear it. Ray's voice, soft, honest. She stood silently in the doorway for a moment, listening, then went into the bathroom and closed the door, not to hide, to breathe, and cry where no one would feel responsible for her tears. The fever finally began to break around dawn. Annika's breathing slowed, her skin cooled. Ray stayed awake, afraid to look away in case something changed, and he had never felt more awake in his life. Annika opened her eyes. Mommy, she asked. Ray stayed where he was, unsure whether to move. Tanya laughed with relief. Ray laughed too. Annika took a bite. Ray smiled. Are they good? They're brave, she replied. Ray didn't understand the word, but he felt it. While Annika ate, Tanya stood beside Ray in the kitchen. Thank you for staying, she said softly. Ray shook his head. I didn't stay, he replied. I came. Tanya looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see a man trying to return. She saw a man who had already arrived. Later that day, Annika slept peacefully. Ray sat on the couch, exhausted. Tanya sat beside him. This used to scare me, she said quietly, letting you get close again. Ray nodded. It scares me too, he admitted. Tanya smiled faintly. Good. Ray realized something important. In his old life, he avoided problems until they disappeared. Now, he stayed until they passed. He didn't solve anything that night. He just didn't leave. And somehow, that changed everything. Family wasn't a title. It wasn't blood. It wasn't history. It was who showed up when things were quiet, uncertain, and difficult. That night, Ray didn't feel powerful. He felt useful. And for the first time, that felt better. Ray didn't make any speeches, didn't say he would always be there. He just came back the next day, and the day after that, and the one after that. Consistency became his language. Tanya noticed the shift in herself too. She stopped bracing for disappointment, stopped preparing for absence, not because she trusted blindly, because she was tired of living as if everything would end. And Ray wasn't acting like someone who planned to disappear. Years later, Tanya would remember this night more clearly than any conversation, because of certainty. This was the moment Ray stopped being a visitor and started becoming part of the story, not through words, not through apologies, but through one simple, powerful decision. He stayed. Nothing changed overnight. There was no announcement, no official decision, no moment where everything suddenly became clear. Ray didn't move in. Tanya didn't ask him to. They continued the way they had started, slowly, carefully, with more listening than speaking. Some days they spent time together. Some days they didn't. And for the first time, the distance didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like choice. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. School mornings, lunches packed in a hurry, evenings that ended on the couch. Ray showed up when he said he would, left when it was time, never pushed for more. Annika accepted this naturally. To her, adults came and went. What mattered was who stayed consistent, and Ray was becoming consistent, not loud, not impressive, just there. Tanya noticed it in tiny ways. She stopped checking her phone every time Ray was late by a few minutes, stopped bracing herself for disappointment before it arrived. Not because she was naive, because Ray wasn't giving her reasons to be afraid anymore. Trust didn't arrive as a feeling, it arrived as relief. One evening, Tanya asked Ray to watch Annika while she ran an errand. Nothing dramatic, but the moment felt heavier than it should have. "You don't have to." "I know," Ray said gently, "but I want to." She left, and that was the point. When Tanya returned, Annika was laughing, Ray was calm, and something inside Tanya shifted, not trust, permission. There were still difficult moments, old memories surfaced, unspoken pain returned, questions hung in the air without answers. They didn't resolve everything, they didn't try to. Instead, they learned how to sit inside uncertainty without turning it into distance. Ray learned to listen without defending. Tanya learned to speak without protecting. Neither of them pretended the past didn't exist, they just stopped letting it control the present. One night, after Annika fell asleep, they sat together in the kitchen. "You're different," Tanya said. Ray smiled faintly. "I don't feel different. You don't try to control anything anymore," she replied. Ray thought about it. "I finally learned the difference between love and ownership." Tanya didn't respond right away. She just watched him, not as the man he had been, as the man he was becoming. Ray didn't propose, didn't make speeches, didn't promise perfection. He promised something smaller, something harder. "I'll keep showing up." And for once that felt like enough. Annika continued being Annika, curious, gentle, honest. She didn't ask for explanations, she didn't need labels. To her, Ray was just someone who came around and listened, who helped with homework. And in her world, that was what mattered. One afternoon, Tanya watched Ray and Annika walking ahead of her toward the park. Annika was talking excitedly. Ray was listening, really listening. Tanya realized something quietly important. She wasn't holding on to Ray out of fear anymore. She wasn't protecting herself from loss, because she wanted him. They didn't become perfect, they became honest. Ray lost his illusion of power. Tanya gained certainty without needing control, and Annika grew up knowing one unshakable truth. She was never unwanted. She was never the reason anything broke. Ray didn't save the family. He earned a place inside it. And Tanya proved something deeper than forgiveness. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from love, so that love can return as something better. Not louder, not bigger, just real. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to Mr. Cooper Stories.